Thank God it's a new year. Now let's hope we'll finally be able to plan something. This year I went with another MinimalismArt B5 journal, however I did not get the dotted one this time. On this new blank slate of a page, I did an ode to 2021 with a quote. It says, "There are better things ahead than any that we have left behind." It's by C.S. Lewis, and I thought it was a great way to remind ourselves that 2020 is behind us and we've got a new year to look forward to. That being said, my future log is probably just a wish at this point, but if it's just a wish that distracts myself while I'm drawing it out, that's totally fine. I did kind of the same thing that I usually do for my future log with big boxes on the top. Typically, I'll fill those in with little mini calendars, but I decided to forego that and just do the numbers at the bottom. I find that I look at my phone anyway to double check my calendar, so I might as well not draw out 12 little tiny calendars. And did anybody else see that the second half of the year spells out Jason? I discovered this for the first time this year and it's completely blown my mind. This page is a layout page. I like to write down different measurements that I use all the time, especially for like weekly logs. I usually have bubbles that I write out, but since I used a lineless book this year, I just used the measurements instead. My most used spread was actually my address spread, and it's just this simple spread with the name on one side and address on the other. I like it to keep all the addresses of people I send Christmas cards to. I know that I could have a separate book for this, but I find that I lose it and I don't have that many addresses to keep track of, so it's nice to just write them down to keep them updated. Another spread that I get a lot of use of, especially now that I use mostly ebooks, is my books and movies spread. This is a nice way to keep track and have a bookshelf of sorts to keep track of all the books that I've read and the movies that I've watched so that I can kind of remember what I've seen this year. Following that is an information spread. I know it is this riveting stuff, but it is another spread that I use a lot. It's just a simple like website, password, username, etc. spread that I find that I use quite often. And then we've got a health tracker. So the one on the left is basically a weight tracker with 12 lines for the month, and then on the left column I'll fill in the details of that. And on the right is just a breakdown of some more information like measurements. It just really helps me to keep track of my health goals during the year to have these two spreads. And here's a quick flip through of everything that I've done for the yearly setup section of my bullet journal. If you're like me and have gotten the lineless journal either by accident or on purpose, I got mine by accident. I do find that it is really helpful to go over all the spreads in pencil first to make sure that everything's laid out the way you want it before you go in with that pen, because without the lines you really need to use a ruler or something to help try to get straight-ish lines. Once I go over it with pen, I don't care if they're 100% straight, but if they're super wonky, it would just drive me nuts. My January spread is just about as simple. I do have some doodles and a little bit of color this time around. I decided to go with kind of a sweater theme for January since where I live the climate is pretty mild and we don't have to bundle up, so kind of now is the time that we're really breaking out those sweaters where the rest of you guys have probably been freezing for months. I really like the letter jacket or letter sweater style that you get from like universities or places that you visit, so I decided to kind of go with that for my cover with the January on the sweater, kind of like it's been embroidered or knitted on. To fill it in, I went in with some Crayola Supertips and this Artist Loft pen that I deeply regret, as you can see from the bleed through. This is why we're supposed to do pen tests before we start, but of course I didn't do that, but once I finish this theme, I'll show you how I kind of fixed it. I just went in with some pre-measured boxes. I think they're about 4 centimeters by 4 centimeters, and if you have blocks, it'll probably be close to 5 by 5 blocks in a B5 journal, but I've been using a ruler and getting some math practice in. The bleed through wasn't entirely that bad, so as I filled it in, I kind of decided that I liked the snowflakes that bled through. It kind of went with one of the little sweaters, but on this one part, it is kind of perfectly placed in between two days, so I'm just pretending that it is highlighted as some kind of big planning thing that I had to do during the month. Even though I probably won't do anything on that Monday and Tuesday, I'm just going to pretend that it's like mega planning. Maybe I'll go and do something planning for this year of 2021. Do something big, since we might be able to do something this year. The biggest change that I made this year from last year's monthly setup to this year's monthly setup is that I'm doing some really big gratitude pages instead of working so hard on those habit trackers. So I'm going with an I am grateful for section, so it's just something to start the day off as some gratitude, and then the next page is what would make today great, so that's the way I can take control of the day and say, like, I could do this one thing to make today really awesome, and then at the end of the day, one thing that I could have done to make today better. So it's kind of taking control and saying, like, you are in control of making your day better or worse, and then finally, what is one thing I can do to make tomorrow even better? For the weekly spread, I did 4 centimeter columns with 1/2 centimeter in between, and then at the bottom of the page, I did my habit trackers and some chore trackers to kind of keep track of what's going on. I find that the habit tracker on the bottom of the page, which I kind of played with last year at the end of the year a little bit, helps me actually keep the habits accountable, at least for the week, because it's a fresh start each week instead of just like, oh, well, I've been really bad about drinking all my water this month, so I might as well not bother with it. So this way I see it every day while I'm planning stuff for the day and for tomorrow, and I'll actually fill it in and be a little bit mindful. And that's it for this January spread. Here's one last flip through.